Welcome to the Art Elevator podcast, where we explore fascinating stories behind the scenes in the art world. This episode is brought to you by Artifactual History and Larissa Wild Fine Art. To stay inspired and informed, you can join our email list by clicking on the link in the show notes or by going to larissawild.com and signing up for our podcast list. An internationally recognized appraiser, speaker, and global thought leader, Alva is the first African-American Fellow in Arts and Antiques of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors and a Fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. With over 2 decades as an adjunct business professor and an MBA, she brings a distinctive lens to the conversation around personal property, cultural memory, and intergenerational legacy. She is the founder of The Legacy of Value, Art Across Generations, a cross-generational initiative that connects art, family stories, and wealth planning. Meet Alvah Beander, a pioneering art appraiser and global thought leader behind The Legacy of Value, Art Across Generations. She brings powerful insights into how families can preserve cultural memory, personal property, and intergenerational wealth through art. Welcome, Alvah.
Thank you for having me. Once again, I think I was perhaps your second podcast, and I'm excited to be a number, I don't know our number today, but another chance to spread my message and the things that I've learned over the years with your audience. Thank you for having me.
Oh, we're so honored to hear everything you have to say, Alva, and that will lead me to my first question. What inspired you to create the Legacy of Value Art Across Generations?
It's interesting. I like the introduction, and thank you so much for the introduction, but I'm really most famous known as Granny. I have 2 grandchildren, the best in the whole entire world. And so I'm Granny. I'm a baby boomer. And with the baby boomer generation, we were supposed to have the greatest transfer of wealth. This is something that I've heard for 30, 40 years. We're there now, and I'm watching what may not be the greatest transfer of wealth. I've found through my estate work in particular some very positive situations, but I've also been watching some very not positive situations leading to litigations within and amongst family members. I tend to be analytical, so the question was, what makes the difference among these families? They're all types. Some of them are rich, some of them are middle class, some of them, are West Coast, East Coast. What makes the difference in the way families react at these periods of time? I can't address the healthy family versus the dysfunctional family because I've seen the flip of both. I've seen the healthy family become dysfunctional, and I've even seen the dysfunctional family start to heal and be healthy. So I said, what can I do in these situations? And I can address some of the issues, not the healthy, dysfunctional, but I can address some of the issues in valuing personal property and in particular art. I see education as a vehicle for the family, estate attorneys, and courts.
Oh, that is fabulous and so needed in this moment in time. And how do you define value when it comes to personal property and art?
The first thing that comes to everybody's mind is when we talk about value, they think we're talking about a price. It is about something more than a price. It means its history, its impact, and why it matters to people over time. In the world of art archives, values shift depending on who's looking, when, and why. It's not fixed. It grows, it changes, and sometimes it surprises me.
Wow. And how can younger generations be engaged in legacy planning then?
It's important to start them early in conversations and in impact because their minds are open to actually learning and are conditioned to learning because they're in school environments. You will find that most when you listen to most successful people, they talk about when they were in the third grade, what they loved in the third grade. And with that, I started noticing we are who we are throughout our whole lives. We're just conditioned to be different or ourselves or whatever. So the first thing to do is engagement, is to educate your children or your family or your community about your collection. And they can start by being your inventory assistant. They can take pictures, they can measure, they can put the story behind the piece together for you as well. They're very good at using technology. So the audio part of the story about this art, how your family got it, what it means to your family. Some of these stories initially don't seem to mean a lot and are only valuable to the family. However, we're finding through archival information and kind of new historical content that some of your collection for the future may be an important one. A good example is one of my appraiser friends, and I think you're working, Sarah, and maybe working with him. He bought a wonderful house, and I visited, has a beautiful door. And the story behind the door is the house was owned by Martin Perrier's family, and the door was created by Martin Perrier. So this is the kind of thing, when that house was built, when that door was put in, it didn't have a lot of significance, I'm sure, to the family or anyone else. However, with the new historical context of the actual artist, we see that it is now in the lexicon.
I love that story. Yes, our mutual friend. I know just what you're talking about. And yeah, I love how you are focusing on this education, which can lead to better outcomes for everybody. So, what are some common misconceptions families have about legacy and inheritance?
The biggest one is that our value, our point of view is alike or similar to others in our family. We think a lot of times that expensive is the most important, where it may not be. I know that I've asked a number of people this over the years, my clients, and have done it with myself and with my family. So I say to my son, "Oh, which pieces do you like the most?" And I expect him to say the most expensive pieces because he actually knows the prices or the values of the pieces. He is in no way interested in the most expensive pieces. He is interested in and loves the art that was in his room when he was growing up. He is interested in and loves the art that I brought to his class one year when I did a little lecture on art in the DC area, the DC artists. And I bought Joe Hostin's work, Calvin Coleman, Amber Robles Gordon, and Sam Gilliam. And I brought all of their work to his classroom, and I was a hit. He was a bit nervous about me coming, but I ended up being the hit. The kids love the art, they love the stories, and some of them actually got really interested in art. And one is an art historian now, and one is actually an artist because they didn't see art as a career. And so those are the kind of things, the misconception of what you think is valuable and what they think is value. We have this thing about the antiques, okay? I'm going to mention it, the brown furniture. The brown furniture, we know that many generations are not fond of the brown furniture. We know that almost for a fact. However, we say they don't like antiques. We throw that around a lot. They don't like antiques. But I'm here to say, yes, they do. They like an antique Rolex watch. They like and they like a vintage car. So they like vintage. They like, what is it called? Beta. What is it? Oh goodness. It was the video format. We had VHS and Beta.
Yeah.
Betamax. Right. They like that. They like early technology. And so it's always a changing contextual kind of thing to look at in what's valuable now, what's been valuable, and what will be valuable. Because as someone who is a baby boomer, I've seen the arch of a genre go up, come down, go back up again. I remember about 10 years ago, I went to an exhibit at the Smithsonian of lunch boxes. And I'm like, wait a minute. I had those lunch boxes. Mine had the Jetsons because I loved space and all of that. And so there was a whole exhibition of the lunch boxes. I remember calling my mom at the time and saying, hey, where are my lunch boxes? They're valuable now. And she goes, yours was too beat up. Yours, you weren't careful with yours, not museum material. But who would have thought that lunch boxes at some point would be in a museum? So again, some of the things that I think the brown furniture will have another day, but maybe 200 years from now again or something. So there is a time and there is a place for all of it. And that's why some people, I have clients that are what I call art hoarders. And so they have storages of these kind of things that they just know will come back. So these are the things that the biggest misconception is what is valuable to you is valuable to others. And one of the things my grandmother, I'll never forget, she had a big meeting with us. And this goes back to what you should have the kids do. She had a big meeting with us. She was in her 90s. She passed at 97. And she went around the room and she started giving us her valuables, her jewelry, the art, the this. And we were like, Granny. And she's no. When she finished, she had an inventory list. She gave everybody what she wanted them to have or what she thought they liked or whatever. She let us go through some other things at that pick what you like kind of thing. And then she says, and when I close my eyes, I don't want any of you to ever say anything about what another person got because this is mine. These are my things and I'm giving it to you. So there are any issues today, you must speak to me about them because I do not want to close my eyes and you're fighting over a diamond ring. The family is more important, going back to value. The family is more important than the fight over the diamond ring or that piece of art or this piece of art.
Wow, amazing. Imagine if all grandmas were that clear and brave too. That takes a certain amount of bravery to be able to speak so clearly, but in having those boundaries and being clear, what a gift to you guys.
Yeah. And just a reminder, she's 4'11". she we all remind ourselves of that because she always was feeling bigger than life. But she was 4'11". She was very clear. And what's interesting about it in the long run, because I am in court cases with families over estates, is that, as she says, it belonged to her. So when we get into these situations in court cases, you do have to say, you didn't earn that when nobody had to give it to you. But I will say the mistake that estate lawyers make and courts, in my opinion, that I've seen, is that they do think that art and personal property can be divided like money or stocks and bonds. We cannot split the painting. We cannot split the quilt. So there does need to be a whole kind of different mindset about how you handle personal property as opposed to cash, crypto coins, whatever other kind of currency that's available, or even real estate. Real estate falls in the same line as the art, though, because real estate does lead with that. Not only is it usable, you're living in it, but it has appreciable value. And people love some houses or homes or whatever, and some hate them. So art gives you that kind of emotional realm as well. So the two things I see in court so many times trying to be split down the middle. And one piece of art someone may love and the other one thinks it's nice but doesn't love. So these kind of things need to be clearly laid out, like Granny, as to what piece do you like. Have your family come over and identify the pieces they like. Know that your engineering daughter may like the abstract better than the figurative, or may like not like either one. So those are the things that you want to consider maybe donating to an institution, a university, a library, a museum, those pieces that the family may not be so interested in, so that they will have a life that others can enjoy and learn from in the community. So that goes to the community building as well. Everything maybe should not stay in families, that they should move out of the family's realm into the fuller community.
Yeah, that is great advice there. And that's something where I know you've helped a lot of people facilitate this type of thing, as we do as appraisers, but particularly in your genre, you have done a lot of this work, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, especially, okay, things like in my genre, because I specialize in African American, and African diaspora. So one of those very interesting things, and back to how we talk to children, my grandmother had quilts. When the quilt season, at the end of quilt season, we had to fold them, take care of them, put papers in between. There was this whole process of what we had to do at the end of the season of using the quilt. Then we stored them in cedar chests, and then we take them out at the beginning of the season. There's a whole kind of process of bringing them out and using them, because we used the quilts, right? But I knew the value. She valued those quilts, and she would tell us what some of those symbols on the quilts meant. And even though for years, that just was inside, but it became outside when I joined the American Society of Appraisers, and my mentor was Barbara Shanley. Thank you, Barbara. I'm here today because of Barbara Shanley. Barbara Shanley had a specialty in textiles. So textiles now is, you mean like the quilts? And it takes me back to the childhood. But Barbara Stanley, of course, taught me the importance of quilts, where they fit into the canon. And she helped to even have a designation for textiles in Appraising today. She and about 6 or 7 other women that were interested in this genre. Of course, this was utilitarian and kind of folks area, until the day that the G's Benz quilts came off of a bed and went onto a museum wall. And then they were considered fine art. So again, who would have thought? Who would have known that quilts would get themselves elevated to the status that they are now, with a market that's sometimes unbelievable? I grew up in Florida, so the Florida highwaymen, do you know how many of those paintings we had back in the day? Everybody had them. They were everywhere. Those guys along the highway. I have family in Miami. I grew up in Orlando. You go out on the highway, you're going to get, I don't know, 5 or 6 of them. And now I see them with auction prices. I see them in galleries. And so things, again, change over the years and get a whole new meaning. So you have, going back to value, because I always like to stay with value, you have to still base things, to me, on what you value. I believe that what you value can be an asset to you, and should be. You can love something and have an appreciable value as well. They can go together. I think people like to separate it and even say, oh, I only buy what I love. I buy what I love too, but I might not buy every textile that may not appreciate in the same way as another one. And then some I will buy because I do just love it and I don't care about the value. But I think everybody needs to become clear with themselves and their family as to what the collection is, what the intent is for the collection while we're here, when we leave. And some people, they feel a little morbid about talking about leaving Earth here. But I think that is something that we know that we all have an appointment to do, that we will be leaving. And I will say this as someone who, is closer to leaving maybe than you guys, is this. When I leave Earth, this collection that I loved and took care of all these years and all, do I want them at the Goodwill being discovered for somebody paid $7 for that piece that I worked 3 years to get? No, I do not. That's why it's important, the planning. You don't want the randomness of it all. I had a client over in Bethesda, Maryland, very highly placed lady. She passed and they did not find the information, the appraisal. Her grandson was outside selling her pieces for $20 a mass and $25 for the statues of the African art. I'm going to have to pause because even still thinking about it. Oh my God. So, do you want that? Without a plan, that is what you're doing. And when I talked to the young man, very nice young man, I was like, and I showed him the appraisal and told him, talk to his lawyer. And I said, do you know the value? He says, no, my grandmother used to let me play with these things when I was a little kid. So, no, I never had the idea that they were highly valued because they were just my playthings. And it goes back to reminding me of the quilts and the folding and the putting away of the quilt. I got from my grandmother, though, these are important. And this is the way we take care of important things. And I came home and I said to my son, how much do you think this is worth? He goes, oh, same thing. Master he used to play with. He says, oh, I don't think about them having a price. I'm like, I got it from Bonhams. Bottoms, don't you?
That should give you a clue, yeah.
He knows Bottoms because he has watches that he got from the Bottoms. So I'm like, yeah, you haven't looked at our appraisal lately. And so I had to pull out our appraisal and go over with him. And also my grandchildren, who sometimes I let play with masks too, that these are the play masks and these are not. Yeah, so it's just about planning and in creating a legacy of passing the wonders and the beauty of the art that we have collected, that we have traveled for, that we have saved for and worked hard for, to a generation that is prepared to receive. And that not only are they prepared to receive, that they will know for next generation and next generation what they're to do.
Yeah, exactly. It's a form of stewardship and love, both for the
Yes.
person and for one's family. Because I think all three of us work with so many clients where the people didn't want to think about mortality. They didn't convey this information, and now they're grieving. And they also have the additional level of grief of not knowing what to do and fearing that they're going to do the wrong thing. So
It's, Sarah, you make a good point because the other part of that, and we haven't used this word, but it is actually burdensome to the heirs of your collection or to your collection, no preparation for them, especially if they have no understanding of art. And I find, to be honest with you, the people that are in the industry are the worst at not passing the information to their family. I get with a son, a daughter of this legacy person in the industry, and they're like, I never dealt with the art at all. I don't know what any of this is worth or any of this means. And I'm in shock that they never, but then I remind myself, Doctor, heal thyself. And that we can do that. We're so busy doing the work for others that we need to do it inside too. But it is burdensome for people to be grieving and have to deal with, and especially in some states where everything has to be resolved in a year. Some of them, the estates, the settlements are 3 years, 1 year. 1 year is a very short period of time to settle an estate. And on that, I have to say this. I know this is not about them, but I must say it. Estate lawyers, don't call us at the end of the project of when the person passes away and you're working with the family, one of the first things you need to do is engage an appraiser early on. Not,
Hallelujah.
I have to file in 3 weeks and I need an appraiser on these 45 pieces of art that this person had. No, that's not okay, estate attorneys. I just want to put that out there.
Absolutely.
I was going to make the statement that it seems like all of these points that you've brought up, one, not creating a burden, two, educating the younger generation or your family on why something was important so they can then make the right decisions with it. These are all reasons why it's so important to start these conversations early with kids, because then they become known and they're not these mysteries at the end.
So we're all three of us are appraisers here. I'm very curious, how does your work as an appraiser inform your educational approach?
I am an educator. So it starts with that. And that is the basis of my practice, is that even I found that I have 1%ers, 10%ers. I have even a few billionaires as clients, believe it or not, institutions, courts. But I find in almost all the environments, no matter what, in middle class, let me say that, in almost in every category, though, I find that there is missing parts of the educational information that they get from our associations as to who we are, what our purpose is, what we do, and more than what we do is what we don't do. And so we're always having to explain that. I get calls from curators. I need you to let me know the price of this because of this. And first of all, curator, you're not my client. And everything has to go through my client because these are legal documents. Privacy is very important. And we're not free to discuss things with any and everybody. So just educating people as who the intended user is stated in our reports, but in intake, I'm very clear of educating people as to who is the recipient of this information. The actual client for donations or charitable contribution is actually the client and their accountant in the IRS, that they share with the museum the information is between them and the museum. All donors don't want to share the complete appraisal, and they don't have to because that's not the intended user. Now, of course, they have to sign off on the 8283, so they feel like that gives them some space to know what the appraisal says, but actually it does not. And that can be confusing. So I have to educate museum people around my duty, their duty. And it's good that a client does show the appraisal to the museum because then they get to know what level of donation it was. So their developmental people can acknowledge their gift in a special way or different way. So there's a lot to make it something nice to do. But actually, that has nothing to do with me. And so I have to make sure that they understand that. I have to make sure that lawyers understand when I'm their expert witness or an expert witness that I'm not on your client's side. I'm not on anybody's side. I am the objective witness to the value of the art only. I have no, as they say, skin in the game as to whether it works for you, the valuation that I come up with, or it doesn't work for you. And so I have to educate them to not involve me with any information or dialogue or discussion that is beyond the scope of me providing a value. And then for court, since I'm on a roll here, judges, I would like for you to start attending some of our conferences in classes, or that maybe we'll reach out to them. And because they deal with so many different kind of things in their courts, that this is probably not a bigger part of what they have to deal with, but it is becoming more and more of an important part, because the valuations on a lot of this art is more than the houses involved with the legacy transfer. And so to understand, like even with appraisers of real estate, people like, I painted my room a really pretty color and I put up beautiful tile, and the tile was very expensive. And of course, that increases the value of my house. Probably not. And so you have to understand what the principles of value is in terms of an art piece. We're looking at dates, we're looking at medium, we're looking at historical content. We have a lot of indicators of value that that you probably need to know about to be helpful even in listening to our testimony or reading our reports.
Yeah, there certainly is a huge gap between what we do and the methodology and what most people perceive. That is definitely an ongoing challenge in our industry.
Yeah, and on that note, I like it when everybody says, "Oh my gosh, that's right, you're an appraiser. How much is this worth?" And they hold it up to you, and you're like, "I don't know."
The camera's not rolling. I don't have my TV crew here.
I thought you were an expert. I am after I go research it. I don't walk around with these numbers in my head on every artist or artwork. And actually, it might have sold for something yesterday and there's an update today. I don't know. I do have to go research. And while I love Antique Roadshow, I don't want to throw them under the bus, but there is this idea that we look at the piece, we think about it, and then we know a number. And that's just not the way it's done. And so there is an incredible amount of research that has to go into it for comparables. We are required by the Appraisal Foundation for certain kind of procedures and methodology that we have to use. And I would like for people to be a bit more respectful in the fields in which we deal with of that process. And all I can say is on that, someone recently said, "I think I want to be an appraiser. I think I'll take about 6 months to work on that and get become an appraiser." And I said, "In the US?" And they said, "Yeah." I said, "So how are you going to be an appraiser in 6 months?" And then I sent them all the links to the 3 appraisal associations in America, and then my organization, Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyor, our information. This is what it takes to be an appraiser. Please let me know if you can get through any of these programs in 6 months. I can't wait to hear how that goes, because people think we just have numbers that we just make up. And that's a problem.
I love that you highlighted this. I think this is something as an industry that we all face, and it's one of the really critical parts of the education. I feel like we need to continue stressing, but we research. We are deeply experienced professionals with connoisseurship and that foundation that we then apply with research for each item in its appropriate market for its appropriate intended use. Those are like multiple levels of things that all need to happen with a human brain and time. And we're not just spitting out these numbers willy-nilly on the spot without doing any research. So yes, that is what being an appraiser requires.
And the funny thing is, last week I was a moderator at that conference for London and Ireland, and my panelist was a PhD in artificial intelligence. So we got into that. And yes, artificial intelligence can be very helpful, I'm sure. But here's the thing, there is what they call hallucination in that area. There's also, it's working from that data that's 3 to 4 years old. We work in the data that's like usually cut off at 3 years. We don't generally go back more than 3 years, unless, of course, it's a death, and the death was 5 years ago. We go by the death date. But pretty much our work has to be extremely current. So if there's an auction this week of an artist that I'm looking at, and there was one last week, I'm looking at what happened last week, what happened this week. And in my area, because the explosion in the African American art in particular. I'll give you a good example. There's an artist that I've valued a lot of her things now, and they're in the millions, the multi-millions. And just 5, 6 years ago, they were $10,000, $12,000. And that artist is Amy Sherrill. Okay. There's an artist named Derek Fedor, but he does the marching bands and they're just beautiful. Hey, 3 years ago, look at his prices and look at the million that he's in now. 3 years ago or 4 years ago, values AI right now is of no help to us. We need current values. And so we have to keep up with all the markets or the relevant markets that our artists' works are in. And that in itself creates a lot of work. There's a lot of new people in the industry. And so that becomes an issue for us because for me and all of us, we're trenched in, is this a relevant market? So with all the new players, I need to figure and know that you're going to be around. How can you be relevant if you're short term? So there are galleries and auction houses that we routinely look at for consistency of the market, which is a bigger kind of microeconomics than this gallery sold a piece last week for this amount, a high amount, but this gallery is 2 years old. And we watch galleries come and go. We're watching a lot of things go on in the auction world. We have to ask ourselves, Sotheby's and the Pace Gallery deal, what is that? I won't speak anymore on that. But those are the kind of things that, as appraisers, evaluation specialists, that these are all factors that we have to pay attention to. One of my speakers last week talked about the new UK ports regulation starting in June. How does that affect valuation? So do we add the cost of that because it takes 3 to 4 months for the piece to go through the process of being entered into the UK? If you didn't do that 3 to 4 months before you send it. So it's not a tariff. It's not shipping. It's not handling. I guess it is handling. And so now we have to look at those kind of values. And a lot of our clients are international now. And so when we're talking even legacy and family, a lot of my clients and even friends, half their families live in another country. And so that's a whole nother thing we haven't even discussed, if in terms of legacy, what it looks like when it's global. An octopus with a lot of different tentacles.
Oh, so many tentacles, that's for sure. Let's distill this down into a practical step. What are the first few steps listeners can take to document or assess their own family collections so they can have a starting point?
Okay, the first step is to take pictures of everything that you consider in the collection. Then I advise you to go online and get the Getty ID. And to the best of your ability, do the Getty ID, measurements, condition, document in the ways that you can. This is when we look at the intergenerational bit. I believe that your teenager should do this. I believe that your teenager can pull out that iPhone 16 like my granddaughter has, even though I don't have a 16, and take those pictures and do that kind of measurement. That's something a young person can do for the family. And it also equates them with what the family has. So that, that way the conversation starts by starting with factual information about what the family has. So take the pictures, do the Getty ID. I also think that because I do involve myself in genealogy, I do believe that if there's a story to the pieces, that The story should be added probably orally by some audio app that those kids have. That it should be, the story should go with it, because also a big thing that we haven't talked about and is important is provenance. They can start recording the provenance of the artwork that is in their collection if they know what it is. And so that starts it. A lot of work is already documented, but a lot of work has not been documented, and they do come through families. And frankly, we have the lost registry where there's pieces that we need to know where they are. And sometimes families find they have them and didn't recognize how they got them or why they have them. But a lot of them, there's families that are now giving back pieces that came to their family in a way that may not have been appropriate. And then some families are finding in provenance that the piece is way more important than they ever thought they were. And starting the listing of the provenance as much as they know, keeping the receipts or documentate, become an archivist of your family collection. All documentations that you can have, gather them, put them in files, color code files, whatever. These kind of practical things is the start. Because if you start working with a professional, like the three of us, the more that you have already in place, the better the project goes. It does save you money. Now, we're still going to have to do the work ourselves too, because that is due diligence on our part. But having a base to start with does give us time to look over your documentation and everything before doing on-sites. And so that can make the process go like smoother for you and your family. Or for you to give all that to the lawyer who knows how to contact our type professionals, and the lawyer will have something to pass off to the professional. The more that you can have in place for the professional, the bigger impact it will have on the process of the project.
That's a great point, because yes, so often with families, they don't even know where the car title is. Like they don't know where the documents are, let alone the really important documentation of the collection. So I love that you're highlighting that. And how do race, culture, or community histories influence legacy planning?
Oh, gosh. So it's so interesting. I was speaking to a young man yesterday and his husband. They were out in San Francisco, and I've known them for a bit now. And he was out speaking at Stanford, and I was, oh, this is great. Oh my gosh, what's he speaking about? I found out that his husband is one of the people who created the AIDS quilt. And, and then going back and looking through it, he in no way intended to start the AIDS quilt in the way that we look at it now. But he was representing a community that he loved, and he was watching his friends die. And he and several other people got together and decided to do the AIDS quilt. And here we are, 50 years later. And that's so that goes to a culture of LGBTQ. We look at, we sometimes in my areas, we don't know that it's going to have the impact. So we have to almost start with thinking it. I worked on the pre-planning committee of the African American History and Culture Museum for 3 years. I was a consultant on that. And we had a whole plan as to how we were doing collections. But there was Dr. Claudia Brown who said, we're going to also go to the community and see what people have. Because that was done, and many people don't know this, the name of that museum when I worked on the pre-planning committee was the National Museum of Arts and Culture. It is now the National Museum of History and Culture. Why is that? When Claudine Brown had us go out into community to see what people had, it was overwhelmingly history because people had started their own in-house museums or collections. There was one guy, we went to his house and he's a Seminole, and he was 4 flights, top to bottom, of all things Seminole. And so people have been doing this without us knowing, but people used to say, one day they're going to want to see this. One day somebody is going to want to know this story. The women's story, Amelia Earhart. I was in Zonta International for years, and we really honored Amelia. But along the way, Zonta was also collecting other women in aviation, and they did a couple of books around it. Now we're watching, no matter what we think about the flight the other week, but we're watching groups of women go to space. And so those people who've been documenting that along the way, of course, have been of value to the community of women. So the culture of people that are not underrepresented is coming to the forefront in almost all of these diverse communities. I do volunteer work with young people on the spectrum, and they're very interesting because there's so much to know about the spectrum in itself and how that comes to. And so you get to see that when you work with the community of what it looks like on spectrum, not what you think it is, like a Dr. Spock kind of idea. Everybody's a Dr. Spock. They're not. And so you learn from people that are actually in the community who they are without you deciding that they're a certain way and you're writing about them from your perspective. So, the importance of the culture and the influence for that is that the voices need to come from inside of these communities, races, genders, from the people, inside out, not outside in.
I love those points. And it's when stories and cultures are centralized, they're much more vulnerable to being controlled or erased. And so I love how you're pointing out how much more powerful it is when the actual communities are also the stewards of their culture and their history, because then not only are we learning from the source, but in that ecosystem, it's so much stronger.
Yeah. And I think to know the different voices in each of the systems, going back to the art and art collection, this is important. This is not important. This is valuable. This is not valuable. Who says? And it's a value in a time, in a place. What's valuable here may not be valuable in this context. So it depends on, I always have a thing, and everybody knows I say it, go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated. If you can't value me here, I will find a place that will.
Oh my gosh, Alva, I love you. You're awesome.
Yes.
You blow me away how much wisdom you have and how many meaningful things you have your fingers in, all those pies. It's amazing.
Because I try to stay prepared. I do a lot of work around it. I like it when people talk about Christmas. Oh, it's Christmas. I'm like, do you know what Christmas is to an appraiser? First of all, non-sleep. Because we have that December 31st deadline to get at least part one of it done with the cataloging of the collection. And then we're like on lockdown from like January to April 15th in getting those, and they wanted to be earlier, of course, but to get those reports in. And when I say that to people, like, oh, yeah, but the holidays, yes, I carve out time for my family and prioritize my family. And then the next thing is my clients, because this is the business I'm in. I can take a break now because it's April. No, April just passed, but April, and everybody's at the fairs, busy with the fairs. So I could take a little break while they're at the fairs, but they'll be back this week. I just thought about that. They're going to be
It's
back.
what they bought at the fairs.
Right. They're going to be, guess what I got at the fair? And then I got to be going again. Okay, let's get the fair stuff going. Yeah, I try to stay prepared and very mindful in prioritizing the way I look at time and time management based on the business I'm in and then my family values of being that awesome granny that I had. I try to be that too. That's one of my biggest goals in life.
That's fantastic. What's next for the legacy of value? Are there manuals, events, courses on the horizon?
There's going to be there's manuals, events, courses. They will be on my website, and I think you'll probably can you post that? No, you don't post it on
We'll
the
put it in the
podcast.
show notes.
Yeah, we put the links in the show notes.
Okay, yeah. So the links will be in the show notes of the website. The information will be there. My first speaking engagement on this legacy is this is so funny. It's not funny because actually I'm not. I know you want to laugh. It's a convention. I think it's 10,000 dentists who just even meeting with them to go to get started. They're talking about molars. And it's oh my God, my teeth start hurting even talking to them. But they love the molars just like we love the art. And they want to learn more about the art and how they can create legacies in their families. I will be speaking with one of my clients who's a dentist about his collection, how he got started, how he built value, how he uses professionals to help with that process. Because the one thing I'm going to go back to real quick on all of this is this: you must use professionals. This is a very complex environment because it is regulated in a different way than other environments. And you really need to be working with people who are credentialed and who understand the whole industry. A lot of people try to do it yourself method in building legacy. For legacy, for me, you have a team. You have appraisers, you have the lawyer, accountant, and wealth management people. All of those people have different set of skills and value to you. I will start by telling people, they're like, I want to sell this. I'm selling all this stuff. Oh, really? You want to talk to your accountant because selling all this is a capital gain. And you'll sell it and you'll pay what, 20 to 30% taxes on the capital gain you got from selling it. They're like, are you serious? I don't know your particular thing, and I'm not an accountant. So I can't answer that question for you, but I will direct you to the other professionals in the teams that you should put together as them to tell you how much the capital gain will be. Because in that case, if you know that, then they will also tell you if you have this tax write off, then it will put you at a net zero maybe for the capital gain. And that write off, you will need to see me and other certified appraisers. And so we can help you with a donation to an institution that you love to offset the capital gain on selling some of the art. Some of it should be donated so that you will have a balanced portfolio.
I love how you are highlighting the professionalization of appraising and the respect for it, which we don't always experience, but also that, yeah, it takes a team and that it's some people are going to find themselves in a situation they're not happy with if they don't respect the professional team and build that. They're going to have much better outcomes. And we don't all do the same things. Like, I think all of us have spent vast amounts of time knowing something's really off outside of our area of where we can speak to it. And if I could count the amount of time I've spent on the phone saying, I can't speak to this, but I strongly recommend you call your lawyer, accountant, financial advisor, etc., because I really think you need to check with them before you do anything. I wish every person really could impart this.
And you know what? And one last thing on that team too, and going back to the actual family, I think families need to also be clear and aware of this. Your smartest person in the family that may be able to handle some other parts of your asset categories or maybe not the right person to be in charge of your art or personal property, because the treatment of the personal property and art does have, and I won't say emotional component to it, but an emotional component to it, where the other the person may be a cut and dice kind of person, and they can cut and dice your bank account, your stocks and bonds, and you don't have anything to consider but that. And that's good for a person on that side of the equation. But for the art side, I would look to someone that is legacy orientated and archival minded and have another mindset around working with appreciable assets that have a emotional value to them.
Because as professionals, we're objective, we're impartial. It wasn't our grandmother's painting. We can come in with that objective perspective and just look at it professionally for the intended use as an asset without all that emotional overlay that a very granular person in the family might have for every other kind of asset class.
And that's what we keep saying. It's a different asset class, and it should be treated differently.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can see why you chose the name Legacy of Value. That really sums it all up, doesn't it? Thank you, Alva, for being here with us today. It's been such a pleasure. We are so honored to have you again on the Art Elevator podcast.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Alva.
This episode of the Art Elevator podcast was brought to you by Artifactual History and Larissa Wild Fine Art. To stay inspired and informed, join our email list today. You'll receive updates about our latest creations, valuable tips, and a deeper look into the art world. You can find the link in the show notes below or by going to larissawild.com and signing up for our podcast mailing list. Here's to elevating your life with art and creativity.